Welcome back. Are you ready to meet your inner cast of characters? The human psyche is not a single unified entity, but more like a dynamic community of subpersonalities, archetypes, and complexes, each with their own characteristics, agendas, and energies. Throughout human history, we've recognized this multiplicity in our myths, religions, and stories, populating our inner worlds with gods, demons, spirits, and other beings that represent aspects of our experience. Jung's great insight was recognizing that these aren't merely cultural metaphors, but psychological realities, inner figures that influence our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in powerful ways. Today, we'll meet the main characters in your inner cast, exploring how they shape your experience and how you might develop a more conscious relationship with them. Understanding these inner figures isn't just theoretical. It provides practical insight into why we sometimes act against our own intentions, feel pulled in contradictory directions, or experience powerful attractions and repulsions to qualities in others. Let's begin with the character we introduced in our last video, the persona. This is your social mask, the face you present to the world, derived from the Latin word for the masks worn by actors in ancient drama. The persona represents how you've learned to present yourself in various social contexts. We all develop multiple personas. The professional self, the family self, the social self. These develop naturally as we learn what's expected and rewarded in different environments. A healthy persona is flexible, allowing you to function effectively in social situations while remaining connected to your authentic self. Problems arise when you become over-identified with your persona, mistaking your social role for your whole identity. The executive who can't turn off boss mode at home, the caretaker who doesn't know how to receive care, the perpetual entertainer who can't be serious. These are examples of persona inflation. Equally problematic is when a radical split develops between your persona and other aspects of yourself, creating a sense of inauthenticity or the feeling of being an imposter. This can happen when social expectations feel dramatically at odds with your inner reality. A sign of persona over-identification is feeling empty or lost. When a social role changes or disappears, like retirement, children leaving home, the end of a relationship. When your identity has merged with a role, losing that role can trigger a genuine identity crisis. The goal isn't to eliminate the persona. We need social interfaces, but to maintain conscious awareness of the distinction between your social roles and your deeper self, allowing for a more flexible and authentic expression in the world. Perhaps the most famous of Jung's archetypal figures is the shadow. Those aspects of yourself that you've rejected, denied, or failed to develop. The shadow contains qualities you've deemed unacceptable based on family, cultural, or personal values. If you were raised to believe that anger is always bad, your natural aggression might be relegated to the shadow. If your family valued intellectual achievement above all, your emotional or artistic qualities might be pushed into the shadow. The shadow forms as we shape our conscious identity, necessarily leaving behind what doesn't fit our developing self-image. The personal shadow contains your individual rejected qualities, while the collective shadow contains those human potentials your entire culture has deemed unacceptable. Both influence your life, whether you're conscious of them or not. The most common way we encounter our shadow is through projection. seeing our disowned qualities vividly in others while remaining blind to them in ourselves. When someone triggers an intense emotional reaction in you that seems disproportionate to the situation, it's often a shadow projection at work. You're not just reacting to them, but to your own disowned qualities that they embody. What makes shadow work challenging is that we've developed elaborate psychological defenses to keep these rejected parts from consciousness. Yet the shadow doesn't disappear when denied. It operates autonomously, sometimes sabotaging our conscious intentions or erupting in unexpected ways. The shadow isn't all negative, however, because it contains everything we've failed to develop. So it also houses potential strengths, talents, and energies. The capacity for healthy anger might include the ability to set boundaries. The capacity for selfishness might include healthy self-care. Shadow integration involves reclaiming these gifts while transforming their destructive expressions. We'll explore shadow work in much greater depth in Module 5. But for now, simply notice when you have strong, seemingly irrational reactions to qualities in others. These reactions point toward your own shadow material. Another key pair of figures in your inner cast are what Jung called the anima and animus, the contrasexual archetypes representing the feminine qualities in a male psyche and the masculine qualities in a female psyche. While Jung's formulation was based on binary gender, modern Jungians have expanded this concept to recognize that regardless of gender identity, we all contain both traditionally masculine and feminine psychological qualities. Everyone has aspects of receptivity and assertion, logos and eros, structure and flow. These inner figures develop first through our relationships with significant others of different gender expressions, beginning with our parents. They evolve through stages, from primitive to sophisticated. An undeveloped anima in a man might appear as mood swings or sentimentality, while a more integrated anima brings emotional depth and creative capacity. An undeveloped animus in a woman might manifest as opinionated judgment or argumentativeness, while a more developed animus brings intellectual clarity and purposeful action. Like the shadow, we often project these figures onto others, particularly romantic partners. This explains the phenomenon of falling instantly and irrationally in love. You're seeing your own inner feminine or masculine embodied in another person. While this creates powerful attraction, it eventually leads to disillusionment as the real person inevitably differs from your projection. The goal is gradually to withdraw these projections and develop a conscious relationship with these inner energies. This doesn't mean becoming more stereotypically masculine or feminine, but integrating these complementary psychological functions, allowing for greater wholeness and flexibility. We've already introduced the self as the totality of the psyche and its organizing principle. But the self also functions as a specific archetype, the archetype of wholeness and integration. It represents your fullest potential, not as perfection, but as completeness. The self appears in dreams and visions as figures of wisdom or special significance, a luminous being, a wise teacher, a divine child, or powerful animal. It's also represented by mandala symbols, circular designs that integrate different elements into a harmonious whole. Unlike the ego, which identifies with certain qualities and rejects others, the self encompasses all aspects of the psyche in their proper relationship. It's not good versus evil, but the integration of all human potentials in their appropriate expression. You might experience the self through moments of profound meaning, synchronistic events, or deep intuitive knowledge that seems to come from beyond your usual identity. These experiences have a numinous quality, a sense of significance or even sacredness that transcends ordinary awareness. The self functions as an inner guide in the individuation process, drawing you toward greater wholeness through dreams, intuition, and meaningful coincidences. Learning to distinguish the voice of the self from the ego's desires or society's expectations is a crucial skill in Jungian psychology. Beyond these primary figures, Jung identified numerous other archetypes that appear in the human psyche. Among the most important are the child archetype, representing innocence, vulnerability, and potential. This appears in the dreams during times of new beginnings or when we need to reconnect with our spontaneity and wonder. The wise old man or wise old woman, personifications of wisdom, meaning, and deep knowledge. These figures often appear at crossroads or in times of confusion, offering guidance that comes from beyond the ego's limited perspective. The trickster, the disruptive, boundary-crossing figure who creates chaos, but also possibility. When rigid structures need to be broken down for new growth to occur, trickster energy often appears in dreams and life. The hero or heroine, representing the journey of the ego development, courage, and the capacity to face challenges in service of growth. This archetype drives much of our development in the first half of life. These and many other archetypal figures appear not just in myths and stories, but in your dreams, fantasies, and projections onto others. They represent universal human experiences and potentials that we all inherit as part of our psychological makeup. How might you work with these inner figures? Jung developed several approaches, the most famous being active imagination, a method of entering into conscious dialogue with unconscious contents. This isn't mere fantasy or visualization, but a genuine encounter with autonomous parts of your psyche. By acknowledging these figures as somewhat independent entities within your larger self, you can develop relationships with them rather than being unconsciously driven by them. Dreams provide another stage where these characters perform. By paying attention to your dream figures and how they interact with your dream ego, you gain insight into your inner dynamics. Which figures appear repeatedly? How do they relate to your dream self? What might they be communicating? You might also notice these figures in your creative expressions, your attractions and repulsions to fictional characters, and your strong emotional reactions to certain qualities in others. The goal isn't to eliminate any of these figures, but to develop conscious relationships with them. Each represents a necessary aspect of human experience. Problems arise not from their existence, but from their unconscious, autonomous operation, or from over-identification with any single figure. These archetypal figures represent a shared human inheritance, psychological patterns that connect us across cultures, eras, and individual differences. They're not just metaphors, but living psychological realities that influence every aspect of your life, whether you're aware of them or not. In our next module, we'll explore archetypes in greater depth, examining how they function in both personal psychology and human culture. We'll look more closely at the stories they tell, the patterns they create, and how they shape not just individual lives, but the course of human history. For now, I invite you to consider, which of these inner figures feels most active in your life right now? Which might be operating primarily outside of your awareness? What might change if you begin to develop a more conscious relationship with these aspects of yourself? Remember that the goal of Jungian psychology isn't to eliminate parts of yourself or to elevate some over others, but to bring all of these elements into a more harmonious, conscious relationship, allowing the full richness of your humanity to find expression.